McDonald's, the brand war that built an empire. Cold open, the same sign, everywhere. There are places you forget the moment you leave. And places you recognize, before you even arrive. A highway. A parking lot. Fluorescent light. And the same two golden arches. Quietly claiming the edge of your vision. McDonald's doesn't feel like a restaurant. It feels like infrastructure. And that's the first clue. Because what conquered the world wasn't a burger. It was a system that learned how to win brand wars without looking like it was fighting. But every empire has an origin story. And this one begins with speed. Part 1, Before the Empire, Speed as a Philosophy. In 1948, two brothers in California did something strange. They reduced the menu. They redesigned the kitchen like a factory floor. They built an assembly line for food. And called it the Speedy Service System. Not because they wanted to change the world. But because they wanted consistency and control. You could walk up, order fast, receive fast, leave fast. The product wasn't taste. The product was predictability. And predictability is addictive. It's the same reason people return to routines that hurt them. Not because they're good. But because they're certain. McDonald's began as a machine built to remove friction. And friction is where competitors live. Part 2, The Salesman Who Saw a Map. A few years later, a traveling salesman named Ray Kroc noticed something that didn't make sense. A small restaurant was ordering an unusual number of milkshake machines. So he drove out to see why. What he found wasn't just a restaurant. It was a blueprint. A place where teenagers moved like gears. Where the menu was small enough to replicate. Where speed was engineered, not hoped for. Kroc didn't see burgers. He saw a map of America. And a future where the same experience could appear in every city. Like a flag planted in concrete. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't build things. They scale them. And scaling is its own kind of power. Part 3, The Deal That Split a Legend. History still argues about Ray Kroc. Hero or villain? Builder or thief? Visionary or opportunist? What isn't debated is this. Kroc eventually bought the business from the McDonald brothers. He didn't just buy a restaurant. He bought a name. And once you control the name, you control the story people repeat. In life, there's a moment when your creation stops being yours. Sometimes it happens because you sell it. Sometimes it happens because you hesitate. Sometimes it happens because you underestimate what another person is willing to do. And sometimes the scariest lesson is simple. The world rewards the person who can turn an idea into a machine. Even if someone else had the idea first. Part 4, The Real Engine, Franchises, but not the way you think. Most people think McDonald's became powerful because it franchised. That's only half the story. The deeper story is control. McDonald's became a system where most restaurants are owned and operated by franchisees. Globally, the company has long described this as the core of its model. But systems don't scale on trust alone. They scale on rules. Uniform signage. Uniform training. Uniform kitchen workflows. Uniform expectations. When you walk into McDonald's in one country, you're not buying food. You're buying the feeling that the world is still understandable. And then came the move that turned the machine into an empire. Real estate. The insight, often attributed to McDonald's leadership, was that owning or controlling the land beneath the restaurants could give the company leverage, stability, and a different revenue structure. When you control the ground, you don't just sell food. You decide who gets to stand in the best corner of the city. Part 5, Brand Wars, the attacks that made McDonald's stronger. Once McDonald's became dominant, it became a target. And the smartest competitors didn't attack the burger. They attacked the meaning. Fragment, Burger King. Burger King's most famous promise wasn't about taste. It was about identity. You choose. Have it your way positioned customization as freedom. And standardized menus as limitation. It was an attack on McDonald's strength, consistency. Because when a giant owns the standard, the only way to compete is to sell the feeling of being different. Fragment, Wendy's. Wendy's didn't fight on speed. It fought on skepticism. Where's the beef? Wasn't just a joke. It was a cultural needle, popping the image of value. It taught consumers to question what they're given. Fragment, Subway. Subway didn't fight on burgers at all. It fought on morality, freshness, health, control. Not fast food, but a better choice. And suddenly, the battle wasn't about hunger. It was about self-image. Here's what brand wars reveal. In a mature market, companies don't compete for customers. They compete for the stories customers tell themselves. Part 6, Why the Giant Didn't Fall. Many giants collapse because they confuse dominance with permanence. McDonald's has been challenged, again and again. Yet it adapts. Not always gracefully. Not always quickly. But consistently. The company's modern strategy emphasizes core menu, marketing, and digital systems, an approach it describes publicly as accelerating the arches. Read that name again. Not inventing the future. Not reinventing food. Just accelerating what already works. That is not a romantic strategy. It's a survival strategy. Some people lose because they chase novelty. Some people win because they defend the boring foundations. And upgrade the machine quietly. Part 7, The Empire in the Present Tense. Today, McDonald's describes itself as a global system with tens of thousands of locations across more than 100 countries, mostly franchised. It's not just scale. It's distribution. It's not just food. It's habits. And habits are hard to fight. But modern dominance comes with modern tension. Digital personalization versus human labor. Convenience versus health. Global presence versus local backlash. One brand, in a world that no longer agrees on what anything means. The same arches can represent comfort to one person. And compromise to another. And that's what happens when a brand becomes a symbol. People stop arguing about the product. They argue about what the product represents. Part 8, The Real Lesson. If you look closely, McDonald's didn't conquer the world by winning one big battle. It won by winning 1,000 small battles. Removing friction. Standardizing experience. Turning operations into a language. Turning locations into leverage. Turning a brand into a reflex. And if that sounds familiar, it's because your life is also a system. Not a philosophy. A system. Your routines. Your defaults. Your compromises. The stories you repeat when you don't want to think too hard. Some people wait for motivation. Some people build systems that don't need motivation. McDonald's is not a moral story. It's a mirror. Closing, the arches inside you. One day, you'll drive past those golden arches. And realize something strange. You didn't consciously choose them. You simply arrived. That's how systems win. Quietly. Repeatedly. Without asking permission. And maybe that's the final fragment worth keeping. In business, the winners aren't always the ones who are best. They're the ones who are easiest to repeat. Soft beat. If you want the full documentary story. The brothers, the salesman, the real engine, the brand wars. It's waiting in the long video. Because history doesn't just teach us what happened. It shows us how it keeps happening.